The time for silence is over. There was once an unprecedented time in American history when common citizens of their day began to define the rights of man and documented how those rights were being violated by their current government. They wrote to each other. They debated with each other. Ultimately, it was these common citizens who recorded these rights for all eternity, and furthermore created a new and free nation founded on these rights with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. Times have changed, but these rights remain.
I don't take responsibility.
That all citizens have the right to life. That all citizens have the right to pursue happiness. That all citizens are created equal. That all citizens have the right to a public trial. That all citizens have the right to peacefully assemble. That all citizens have the right to petition their government. What happens when you try to exercise these rights today? Is this government honoring your rights? Or are they violating them? Is this the government that those citizens aspired to? There is a solution.
I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition. Hello and welcome to The Left Speaks. My name is Chris and I'll be your host. That video covers exactly how I feel about the direction this country has taken and where we are currently today. We have a president who takes no responsibility for anything he says, does, or has been found to be guilty of with evidence, regardless of whether there was actually a trial held in the Senate or not. We have a country that's divided that can barely speak to each other. That's not how we started out. Conservatives dismiss everything that comes from mainstream media, label it as fake news, don't bother to engage with the evidence, and just flat out ignore things that don't fit their worldview. Those conservatives are welcome to call in and present what they believe their worldview to be, and any evidence they might have, I will be happy to bring it up on air, as long as it doesn't violate any terms of service for any of the services I'm streaming to. Obviously, I can't bring up Stormfront and Daily Stormer and stuff like that. Facebook wouldn't look too kindly on it. However, if you want me to bring up Breitbart, if you want me to bring up Fox News, whatever the case is, you can message me directly or you can drop a link in the chat, and it will be a discussion going directly back and forth between you and I. A little bit about myself. I started off conservative. I was born in Louisiana, went to honor military school, served in the military. You could say I was born that way. As I grew older, began to look into issues myself, began to look at the evidence, most importantly, on who had the right answer regarding things, or at least where the evidence pointed that the right answer was. I became more and more progressive as time went by. I don't care about the Democrat and Republican arguments. I care about liberals and conservatives. And throughout history, throughout American history, liberals have consistently been on the right side of every position. The American Revolution was founded by liberals of their day, by progressives of their day. All men are created equal. You're talking about a time when we were literally rebelling against a king, when monarchy was the conservative position, when nobility, the definition that men were not created equal, was where we were starting. The founding fathers were not conservatives of their day. They obviously did not believe that. They wrote a document stating they did not believe that. And then they founded a government that enshrined the opposite of that. Did we start off perfect? Absolutely not. Would they be conservative by today's definition under some standards? If you look at where we started, sure, I can see that argument. But if you look at the words that were actually written, that all men are equal, and that we've struck down that, some men only count for 3/5 of a vote, then no. If you look at the actual words, they're still progressive today. And we're still having this same argument 200 plus years later. You can go to Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans back when they were the Liberal Party. The Civil War. Republicans love to bring that up. Oh, we're the party of Lincoln. You might have been at one point in time, but you're the ones arguing against Black lives actually mattering anymore. When over 100 years ago, we fought a war to end slavery in half of this country. It's the same tired arguments over and over and over again. Based on lies, based on deception, based on we can't afford it, or they, whoever they may be at that current time, are not like us, and they don't deserve the same rights and protections that we do. Excuse me. Those are not the goals and aspirations this country was founded on. Those are not the goals and aspirations I signed up to defend this country against. I took an oath to the Constitution, not to any single individual president. And while I may not directly serve this country anymore, I still love this country. I still consider myself a patriot. And I will do what I can to make this country better and ensure that it continues. Conservative, progressive, I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum. If you're an American, you should be able to agree with that, especially 2 days after 9/11. And it blows my mind that we have people so in denial of reality today that we were over 190,000 dead Americans. And one side of the political spectrum wants to excuse that. One side of the political spectrum wants to argue about whether the numbers are real, wants to argue about whether the virus is real, wants to argue about whether or not the president should have any responsibility in this. I remember when we used to have presidents that said, the buck stops here. The buck stops with me. And now we have the exact opposite. Nothing is his fault. Nothing is his responsibility. And you have a solid 30% of this country that agrees with that. You have a solid 30% of this country who wants to pretend to be medical experts and talk about comorbidities and fake death rate tolls and how the CDC, which has a director that received a presidential Medal of Freedom from a Republican, but no, suddenly he's in on some grand plan to make Trump look bad. A CDC director who served under multiple different administrations, under both parties, under multiple different presidents. But this one, oh yeah. Suddenly he signed on to become a closet progressive liberal that's out to destroy America by misleading the entire country. Conservatives, directly to you, is your worldview so fragile that you can't even admit that you might be wrong? That you literally have to deny that evidence exists? That you have to hand wave away anything that might disagree with your position? You claim to love America. Why are you silent when there are over 190,000 Americans who have died from a global pandemic? Why are you silent? Why are you excusing this? If you love America as much as you claim to, if you're the true patriots, and no liberal, no progressive, none, not one, can be a patriot. Because progressives are socialists and socialists are out to destroy America. If you believe this, why isn't my side that cares about this death count? These dead American citizens. You know, fellow members of the country you claim that you love. What am I missing here? If you have an answer to that, feel free to call in. I'd love to talk to you. 855-915-5338. 815-915-LEFT. That is toll free. Because we want to hear from you, conservative America. We want to know your answer, you supposed patriots out there, about why we're the only ones that seem to give a damn about fellow American citizens who are dying. Because from this side of the fence, it looks like you're putting party over country. From over here, from where I'm sitting right now, it looks like you have literally put party loyalty over American lives. And I don't see, personally, how I can look at it any other way. We're approaching 200,000 dead. And I notice some people at this point, that's just becoming a statistic. It's just a number. But those are real American lives. Those were mothers. Those were grandmothers. Those were grandfathers. Hell, they were 9/11 first responders. We've already lost 42 of them. "42 individual Americans who the vast majority of this country holds up as heroes, and rightfully so, who were the first responders to the 9/11 attacks, who went into the towers trying to save fellow American lives. <clears throat> 42 now deceased Americans dead from a pandemic that we are handling the worst out of any other equivalently developed country. And you want to tell me you love America? You want to tell me that socialism is what's going to destroy this country? What am I missing? This should not be a political issue. We, those of us on the left, didn't make it one. It wasn't us who decided to turn this into a political issue.
Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that, right? Coronavirus. It's all turning. They lost. It's all turning. Think of it. Think of it. And this is their new hoax. 35,000 people on average die each year from the flu. Did anyone know that? 35,000. That's a lot of people. And so far, we have lost nobody to coronavirus in the United States. Nobody. And it doesn't mean we won't, and we are totally prepared. It doesn't mean we won't. But think of it. You hear 35 and 40,000 people, and we've lost nobody, and you wonder the press is in hysteria mode.
February 28th, at a Trump rally, without a single mask in view. Using his own words, "Hey guys, what's the big deal? The flu kills 35, 40,000 people a year. We're totally prepared. This will be no worse than the flu." The end of February. We haven't even made it to flu season yet. 193,000 dead. How can you stand by and go for this? If the flu was the standard, if the flu is the standard, then how can we do 5 times worse, almost 5 times more deaths, and still believe that we are totally prepared? Conservatives, what am I missing? I want to hear from you. Because again, from where I'm sitting, by his own standard, as we just saw there, we were not prepared. If the flu was the standard, 5 times worse than the standard is literally off the screen. And hey, I get it. It's a global pandemic. What can we possibly do? Except, look at every other country out there that's equivalent to us. Europe, South Korea, Japan, all the other developed countries are handling this better than our country. All of them, every single one. I remember a time when we used to be a leader of the free world. Not the ones dragging our asses. We're not even trying to catch up. I was going to say dragging our butts trying to catch up, but we're not even trying to catch up. We're over here sticking our heads in the sand trying to pretend that nothing exists and there's no problem and there's nothing to worry about. And the death toll just keeps on going up. Are we going to have to wait until November? And then January, when hopefully we have a new president, to start taking this seriously? Again, conservatives, you're the ones that are claiming that the left is what's going to destroy this country. You are the ones that are so worried about socialism that you can't even look at a somewhat more progressive candidate. And as the chat pointed out, we can't even travel to most countries in Europe. The American passport used to be one of the things that lets you travel almost anywhere in the world. You're an American? Hey, you are more than welcome to come to our country. Now your passport won't get you into most developed countries. Not without special exceptions. And do you know why that is? Because we have almost 6,500,000 cases of a global pandemic that these other countries don't have. Like we're a third world country without a healthcare system. The countries that will let you in require tests and stuff now. How's that for global leadership? But again, socialism is what's going to destroy this country. Only conservatives care about America. Only conservatives can be patriots. Ignore the 200,000 dead. And I'm sorry that number was a little high, but I'm sure by this time next week it won't be. Yeah, we're not going to talk about those people because socialism is what's going to kill this country. Again, this didn't have to be a political issue. It shouldn't have been. When the governors in the different cities started first reacting, Republican governors were closing too. Republican mayors, Democratic mayors, Democratic governors. You've got that man right there, the President of the United States, in all his glory, showing here exactly how much he cares about real Americans. And y'all went with it. This could have been very easily handled. Yeah, it's going to be inconvenient, guys. But we could have gotten on, we could have gotten on the telephone. You're the president. I'm sure if you call, I don't know, a governor, he's going to take the call. Even if they're not a member of the same party as you, I'm sure that person is going to take the call. Hell, you could have had a conference call with all 50 governors at the same time. And, had the CDC in the room, the people we pay with our tax dollars to look into things like global pandemics. And you could have said, guys, we got a late start on this, but it's looking like it's going to be a very real thing. Hell, you could have accidentally ignored it and not thought it was a big thing. And then when it got over to this country and people started dying, you could have held this conference call and said, guys, it looks like this is going to be a real thing. We have a lot of people dying. And I don't want American citizens or citizens of the state of Louisiana or citizens of the state of California or citizens of the state of New York or citizens of the state of Alabama or Arkansas or whichever state you want to pick. I don't want them dying because, I care about American citizens. American citizens have a right to life. And on this call with all these 50 governors of both parties, you could have said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to stop traveling for 2 to 3 weeks. Since, we missed the window to isolate it when it first got over here, like we did under Obama with Ebola, where we didn't have to shut down the whole country. Yeah. Since we missed that window, and this stuff is now everywhere, we're going to have to shut down all travel between the states. And it's going to suck. But we're going to do it for 2 to 3 weeks. In any case we find, we're going to test that person, and we're going to test everybody they came in contact with, like we did under Obama for Ebola. And then after 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to be more restrictive on the people coming into this country from a healthcare standpoint. You have to have a clean bill of health to come into the country until this thing is over. And with the entire country shutting down at the same time and people not traveling back and forth, we might have had a good chance of getting this under control. And this isn't just a progressive idea because there were Republican governors doing it. Like I said, this did not have to be a political issue. We're not the ones who turned it into one. But no, what did we do instead? We said, hey, it's fake. It's not a real thing. It's a Democratic hoax. They're just trying to make political hay out of it. And then the Republicans who didn't buy that, yeah, they took a ton of grief for it and they started backing off. But even when we were first starting, with no game plan from the federal level, you had different cities and different states, hell, different counties in the same city, shutting down at different times. I was in Houston, Texas, and Houston was shutting down when all this was breaking free. And Dallas was still open. And you could go to a restaurant in one part of Houston, and you couldn't go to a restaurant in the other part of Houston. At the place I was working, I could drive 10 minutes one direction and go sit in a bar and have a drink if I wanted to do that. I didn't because I'm not an idiot and I care about American lives. So since I travel around the country, if I got infected, I could spread it all over the place. So that would be a really bad thing. I've been trying to be precautious. But I could drive 10 minutes in one direction and go sit down and have a beer with a bunch of people. And if I drove 10 minutes the other direction, none of the restaurants were open. It was drive-through only. And if your restaurant didn't have a drive-through, they weren't even delivering stuff out to you in the parking lots yet. It was just literally, no, you can't come here. Nobody's working. Now, I'm no medical health expert, but if I can drive 10 minutes one direction and have a beer, and the other direction is shut down, something tells me that other side that's shut down can stay shut down for, I don't know, a year, 2 years, 10 years. It doesn't matter, because the minute they open back up, the side that never shut down is only 10 minutes away, and they're still going to have the disease. And when they come over and come to your newly opened restaurant that was shut down for, 3-4 weeks, you've just exposed everybody that you were keeping from being exposed. That's why this needed to be handled at a federal level. This isn't a state or local issue. That's why we're not talking about how many dead people are dead in just one city. We're looking at the entire freaking country. You want to know why we hold President Trump accountable for this? You want to know why we're pointing at him and saying, where's the leadership? This is why. You can't shut down one city or one state and expect it not to travel from the place 10 minutes away. But if you had brought all the governors together and said, hey guys, I'm the president, per the Constitution, I cannot shut down travel in your state. I can shut down travel between states under interstate commerce clauses, but I can't shut down the travel in your state. So we're going to bring all the governors together, Democrat, Republican, and any third parties there might be, and say, look, guys, we need to shut down every state. This is a federal issue. People are going to start dying. We need to get this under control. We don't need to turn it into a political issue. We can quite literally get this under control very quickly. This is why we wanted leadership at a federal level on this. This is why we still need leadership at a federal level on this. But no, we're just going to sit here and let the death toll keep on clicking, keep on going up. Conservatives, how do you excuse this? Why should somebody on my side of the fence at this point, any rational American, look at this 200,000 almost dead American citizens, this 6.5 million cases, this president who has claimed that this is a hoax, that this is going to blow over, that this will be gone by Easter, that you don't need to wear a mask, that the numbers are fake, that the numbers from the bipartisan government agency that is designed to handle this are fake. Why should we look at this and believe that you actually give a damn about this country like you claim? (855-915) left. The numbers open and toll free the entire show. But I really want to know, what am I missing? How is this not party over country? How is this not, I'm going to vote Republican regardless of how many Americans it kills? Hell, not even Republican at this point. I'm going to vote Trump regardless of how many Americans it kills. You know, Trump, who used to claim he was a Democrat and then claimed he was a Republican. Trump, who's flip-flopped back and forth between parties, giving money to both parties. I mean, let's be honest, Trump is just for Trump, from what I can see. But how did this become your guy at this kind of cost? This is an open invitation to any conservative caller. Every Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific. Phone lines will be open. But I want to know. If you want to talk to somebody on the left, if you think you're capable of engaging with rational arguments and evidence, I would love to hear from you. You'll have a chance to speak. You'll have a chance to present your case. And I hope you'll be mature enough to sit here and listen as well. But from where I'm sitting, from where we're sitting on this side, it looks like excuses. It literally just looks like excuses. It looks like you might have voted for the man because you didn't like Hillary Clinton. Hey, that's fine. I'm not a fan. It looks like you might have voted for the man because you've always voted Republican your entire life. Hey, that's fine. I understand. I was there at one point. I knocked on doors for George Bush, the son, for his first term. It looks like you might have voted for Trump because you were tired of quote unquote social justice warriors telling you what you could and couldn't say. You might have voted for Trump because we need somebody from the outside to come in and clean this mess up. And I'd be interested in hearing those things. Some of those points are valid. Like I said, I'm not a Clinton fan. I started off voting Republican my entire life. I started off donating to Republican candidates. I still read their arguments. I agree there's corruption in Washington that needs to be cleaned up. I agree there's corruption at the local level. I was born and lived in Louisiana for the vast majority of my early life. You want to talk about government corruption? Trust me, we've got tons of examples. We're the state that had the governor get on national television and admit he was a crook and ended up ultimately in federal prison for it for a while. Governor Edwin Edwards, feel free to look that one up. So yeah, government can be corrupt. But at this point, what I really want to know, with 193,195 deaths currently attributed to coronavirus in this country, how and why are you still supporting this man? This man who can't even lead by example, take any responsibility, and has admitted on tape that he knew this was going to be bigger than what we thought it was going to be. Eight 855-915-5338. The number's toll free. We'd love to hear from you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry about that. I had to get a refresher on the coffee. And it looks like we might have our first caller.
Hello?
Marilyn, you are now on the line. Marilyn from Louisiana. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you for hosting me. I think one of the first things that I would like to say is elderly lives matter.
I could not agree more.
Nobody's putting that up anywhere. And I don't have a problem with Black Lives Matter, but I also think we need to have people saying elderly lives matter in this country, because we haven't been taking this coronavirus serious, and because we've lost so many of our elderly people. And I have a problem with that, considering the fact that, like you brought up, a lot of these people helped in 911 emergencies. Some of these people have carried our country. And now it's their time to sit back and be retired. They've put in the Social Security system. They've paid taxes. They've done everything for their 30, 40 years of work. And it's finally time for them to get to have some quality enjoyment time. And yes, they're starting to have some health issues by now because they've given so much to work. And now we're just going to throw them away. We don't care who they are or what they've done. We're just going to say their lives don't matter because they're getting coronavirus and they're dying. Oh, well.
Yeah, the elderly are disproportionately affected. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, and I just think at this point it's age discrimination, and at this point it's really showing age discrimination with it. And, you brought up some issues about, explain to me why, it looks like the Trump administration is not taking this serious. And I have some thoughts on that I'd like to share.
Absolutely.
I was a Trump voter. Last time I voted for Trump, okay? And I'm very, very disappointed in the way this whole thing has been handled with the coronavirus because of the situation that we were way behind this curve and taking care of. One of my thoughts with this was, I think when the coronavirus first came about and we didn't have any cases over here yet, and I think that the Trump administration was, and mainly Trump himself, he seems to use denial a lot in terms of dealing with issues. If it isn't convenient for him, he seems to go into denial. And it seems like to me, he just denied that this would ever become a big issue. He just never believed it would. And then when, of course, we weren't prepared, like we thought, we weren't prepared, we didn't deal with it well. And then when it blew up on us and we had a mass of cases over here, he just immediately started denying it and saying, well, we'll be better by Easter, or we'll be this, or we'll be that, and never really took it serious. Well, now, since it obviously has proved him wrong time and time and time again with everything that he's denied, it's proved him wrong. For him to go back now and admit that he was wrong makes him look very incompetent as a leader.
I agree at this point. Yeah, I don't think politically he can at this point. I think that ship has sailed for him. I think you're right on the money. I do think that you're right. He uses denial. I think he uses denial and deflection. And those are his two tools that he just consistently uses. Hey, this is not a problem. Look over here at this other thing. Hey, this is not a problem, but that could be worse. Hey, coronavirus isn't an issue. Oh, wait, now it is. But socialism is going to kill the country. Well, we're talking about what's killing the country right now.
Right, and the thing about it is this: we are in a war. We're not used to this kind of a war because it's a virus, but it is a war. Our people are dying just like if they were dying years ago over Vietnam. When we died, we got out of Vietnam because we were losing too many people and not accomplishing anything. Okay, we didn't care if the Americans that were dying over there. We didn't care whether they were Democrats or Republicans. They were our Americans. They were our sisters and our brothers, and we were trying to get out of that mess because we'd gotten in it over our head. We weren't winning. It was time to get out. But at some point, they had to admit that it was a mistake and they needed to get out. Okay, well, we're stuck in this mess now. We got a war. We got a war with an unknown enemy to us. One we don't have a vaccine for yet. One we don't. But instead of dealing with this and pulling together as a country, Democrats, Republicans, everybody pulling together and trying to save the people that are dying. And not only elderly are dying, we have people with health conditions that are young that are dying. Who would have gone ahead and lived, and with the health conditions they had, they'd had an opportunity to live and go on and have a productive life. But you can't cure them if they're dying of coronavirus before you can cure them of anything else. And so the thing is now is what we've got this big, massive, snowball that's rolling downhill, getting bigger and bigger, faster and faster, and you can't catch up with it. because we stayed in the mile too long, and he can't go back and admit, well, I made a mistake, guys, so we got to go back and redo this whole thing. Then we just have to keep denying that it's as big a deal as it is. But when you're downright lying to the American people about how big a deal it is, and anybody that wants to tell the truth, you want them to just shut up and go away. That's not a way to problem solve anything. Nothing gets problem solved by ignoring it and acting like it doesn't exist. And that's been my big concern. Is if you're going to handle all the big major problems, what if we've got another war right now with another country? You're not going to manage that well either, because you're not managing this war well. I just don't think the leadership is there. That's what's concerning me.
I don't know how you can. I don't know how you can consider anything leadership without taking any responsibility for anything you say or do. I mean, denying there's a problem in the first place, denying that we need tests in the first place, claiming that it's all going to be under control, and now just flat out pretending like it doesn't exist. And politically, after you've denied that it's going to be an issue and then it becomes an issue, I understand that it's, basically shooting yourself in the foot to come back out and say, hey, actually, we need to deal with this. I dropped the ball. But we used to expect more from our presidents. I mean, it was Truman that said that the buck stops here. Whatever happens is, this is where it stops, is with me. I'm the one at the top for a reason, so I'm responsible for what goes on in this country. And that's true in any organization you look at. If you're running a military unit, just because one of your squads is off doing its own thing and you've got 10 soldiers that aren't listening to you because they've got a bad squad leader, if you're in charge of that unit, it doesn't excuse you of any responsibility for anything that happens to them or with them or that they do. And how conservatives are still not holding him accountable. I mean, if you voted for the guy like you did, I can understand you being even more upset by how he's handling this than I am. I never liked the guy. I wasn't in favor of pretty much anything he stood for the first go around. Okay. So he didn't betray me. He didn't betray my vote, my confidence. So your position, I understand entirely. Hey, I voted for this guy and he dropped the ball. I'm pissed. This guy needs to do something. This was my guy. What I don't understand, and who I do want to hear from, is the people that are saying, hey, this is still my guy. How is this still your guy? What does he need to do to not be your guy anymore? That's what I want to know. At what point, what would it take for Trump not to be your guy?
Well, for me, it took me looking at how he wasn't managing things, and also took me looking at the fact that anytime anybody brought up something different than what he was saying was true, of course, it's all fake news. Now, we know there's fake news out there, but it's not all fake news. And the other thing is his, firing so many of his own people, and anytime anybody disagrees with him, attacking them rather than ever listening to what they're saying. And when you have the CDC telling you this is going on, and we spend our whole lives just studying to be epidemiologists, and this is our area of specialty, and it's not yours, Trump. And, these are people you're supposed to listen to make decisions for your American people. But it doesn't look like, to me, it's supposed to be a leadership. Our leaders are supposed to serve our people. That's what leaders are supposed to do. But I see a lot more self-serving going on than I do serving the people. And that's just the way I feel about it. It looks like everything he does is anybody that disagrees with him, he just attacks them rather than listen to anything they say. Everything they say may not be right, but there may be bits and pieces that are right that he needs to hear. When you're at the top, you need to be listening more than you're speaking, because you need to be hearing what's going on, and you need different opinions to understand the bigger picture of everything that's going on. If you shut everybody down that has a different view than you, then you never get the bigger picture. And I think he's shooting himself in the foot sooner or later, because I think sooner or later intelligent Americans are going to be able to figure out, well, this guy's not listening to anybody's opinion other than his own. So he just thinks that if he forces his opinion on everybody, then that'll just be the truth. But that doesn't mean that's the truth, You can force your opinion on somebody that it's not raining outside. It's not raining outside. It's not raining outside. But when they go outside, they're still getting wet without an umbrella or a raincoat. So sooner or later, the truth is going to come through. And I think people at some point have to come around to looking at this more realistically rather than just swallowing what's being said without doing any looking at this thing for themselves.
Well, even at the most basic level, because you said something, more intelligent Americans are going to look at this and figure it out. I think the more intelligent Americans like yourself looked at it, and have already figured it out. But even if you're an idiot, okay, if you're sick, you go to your doctor, not your real estate developer. Okay? The country has 6,467,481 confirmed cases of coronavirus, according to the CDC website that's now on the screen. We've lost 193,195 lives, American lives, according to the CDC website that's now on the screen, which is current and up to date to the best of their ability. Okay? At the most basic level to me, the country is sick. I would hope that we could agree on that. Okay?
Yeah.
Why are people listening to the real estate developer, Trump, and not listening to the doctors, the CDC? The doctors, mind you, who served under multiple administrations on both sides, that's supposed to be an apolitical organization. Like I said earlier, this should have never become a political issue. And it wasn't the progressive Democrats that made it one. It wasn't even a lot of Republicans that made it one, because you had governors, Democrat and Republican, you had mayors, Democrat and Republican, shutting down their different cities and states and counties and everything else. But why is it the ones that want to argue with the doctors, the ones that want to call it fake, are all your hard, ultra right-wing conservatives? And what are they basing this off of? Why are they so incapable of engaging with reality? If they had a heart problem, they're not going to their real estate developer. And if their real estate developer tells them, or their landlord tells them, oh, you don't have a heart problem, just pretend it doesn't exist. And don't listen to the 8 doctors you went to that are all heart specialists that are telling you that you have a heart problem. You know, listen to me. They're giving you fake news. If all of my doctors, okay, there's a few kooks out there. We'll say if I went to 100 doctors and 98 of them were telling me I needed heart surgery, and I had one that was, insane, and the other one that had been disbarred, and 3 mechanics and 2 landlords telling me that I didn't, I think I'm listening to the 98% of doctors I talk to, not the fringe.
Yeah, you have to consider the source. You
Exactly.
have to consider the source from where you get information from, and I think they're not considering the source in this. I mean, Trump probably isn't as worried about catching coronavirus because everybody around him is having to be tested before they can even be around him. Well, that's not happening for the rest of us out here.
You're absolutely correct, and that ought to tell you that on a basic level, for his own personal safety, he takes it rather seriously. Because they had a few cases that... Yeah, they had a few cases that showed up in the White House staff, and then all of a sudden they started testing everybody around them that they'd been in contact with, and Trump's taking the coronavirus test himself personally.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like if everybody around you is being so screened they can't come anywhere near you with it, then you don't have to wear a mask, I mean, but by the same token, if you're in a situation where the average person is going out and having to go to work, or even if they're working from home, they got to go buy groceries or whatever, and you're telling them, well, don't wear a mask, it ain't any big deal. See, I don't wear a mask. Well, he don't need to wear a mask. The rest of us sure do. We don't have the same situation. We don't have all the security around us and all the medical pressures to protect us. And I read something very interesting today off the internet. It was an article on Dr. Fauci, the epidemiologist, who I have a lot of respect for. Trying to give American people the truth about what's going on. It was asking him about, what would you personally do? What do you personally do to protect yourself? And he was saying, of course, he wears a mask. And he said when he goes in 2 places he would not go at all right now is he wouldn't go in a restaurant to eat at all, and he wouldn't go on a plane at all. That's what he felt about that. And the other thing that was saying was he was saying that when he goes to the grocery store or anywhere where he has to buy something and brings it home, he brings it home and he unpacks it out of the packages and throws packages away, and then he leaves the food or whatever he's bought in one place and doesn't touch it for over 24 hours. And when he gets through putting it all in one little place where it's going to sit there 24 hours before he touches it, he goes and washes his hands, and then after he washes his hands with water, he then uses, hand sanitizer after that on top of it. and then he doesn't touch that stuff for 24 hours. I guess maybe most of the surfaces, maybe most of the viruses dead in 24 hours on most surfaces, or those kinds of surfaces. I don't really know about that. I don't know, well, it didn't go into specific surfaces, but it was taught. He saves that much precaution for himself. Now, if you're an epidemiologist and you studied your whole life and become a specialist in this, and you use your knowledge to protect yourself, sounds like the rest of us could really benefit from his knowledge and do what he's doing to protect ourselves. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Clorox everything. When they come home, they get Clorox wipes and they Clorox everything, before they use, cans and packages. People are doing things. But, when you're telling people, oh, you don't even need to wear a mask when you go out, much less worry about hand wash or anything else, and you're not role modeling all of that or anything else, that's a real problem when you're saying basically, there's a problem, you're not going to get anything, and then people are listening to that. But the person they're listening to, like you said, is a real estate developer. He's not a doctor. Look at the head epidemiologist. What he's doing is very different, which is telling us that there's two different ways that this is being presented. And on his blog, there was another article that was on today on the website when I pulled it up too, that was talking about that CDC had felt like there were so many times they had their information.
Now the Democrats are.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
The hospitals. That's okay. The hospitals and doctors and stuff, they were putting out. The CDC was putting out information, and the Trump administration was coming in and making them change what they were putting out. They said they've never been asked by any other administration before to ever change what they were putting out to the American people, making them change wording because they said it was against Trump.
Yep.
How is it against Trump when you're trying to get information to hospitals and doctors about how to take care of their patients? That doesn't have anything to do with Trump. You see what I'm saying? But they're so
it does if you're it does if you're denying that the virus is a problem in the first place. I agree with you completely, but we are to the point that we are going to flat deny reality exists because we made it into a political issue, and now reality is inconvenient to me and my administration. And that's the problem I have right now. We're not talking about a difference of opinion on some ethereal thing, people can disagree over political ideas all day long. That's more than welcome. I happen to think that the progressive side has more right ideas than wrong ideas, but we can go back and forth over those, and those aren't, and in some senses, I mean, we're debating the very existence of a virus, something you can see and you can see the effects of. We're not even just measuring effects at this point. I mean, you could put it under a microscope and look at the thing, Yeah. But we can't admit that if you're on the conservative side right now. And I completely understand where you're coming from. And I agree. If I'd voted for the guy, I'd be absolutely pissed because this is not what anybody should have signed up for. What I don't understand is how there's 30% of the country that's going, yep, this is what I signed up for and this is what I want and let's keep going. Blows my mind.
Yeah. Well, what blows my mind is if we were in a war with another country, people would be screaming for things to change because too many of their American soldiers would be dying. And they'd be screaming for changes to be made. Either win this war or get the hell out.
If we were in a war with another country and we had 190,000+ dead American soldiers and the president was saying there wasn't a war and bullets weren't a real thing and they didn't need to wear body armor because it wasn't a problem, people would be going apeshit crazy, I would think. But apparently I would think wrong because that's not what we're doing right now.
Yeah, it's like they're fighting a war and they still don't realize they're fighting a war just because it's this little, thing that we can't see till we put it under a microscope. We can sure see the effects of it. We can see people dying like crazy.
Well, bullets move really fast, so you can't really exactly see them in transit either. So I'm just going to choose to believe they're not real either. So yeah, those people didn't really die. It's fake news, wrong numbers.
Yeah.
One of the guys that got shot, yeah, he had a broken leg, so that was a comorbidity, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it just blows my mind. The numbers are fakely inflated because, some of those soldiers who, hypothetically died also had the coronavirus and that was a comorbidity. So they didn't die from the gunshot. You can't prove that they did. So yeah, that 190,000 dead American soldiers that we're hypothetically talking about, yeah, that's fake news. It blows my mind that the level of discussion we're at on the conservative side. I mean, if you'd have told me 5, 10, 15 years ago that I would be starting a show to discuss the reality of a virus that one side of the country wants to pretend literally does not exist. And this would be the political issue of my day, of my generation. I would not have believed you.
Yeah. I can understand that.
I mean, I can see a lot of discussions, but I would not have believed this would have been one of them that we would have ever been having.
Yeah, I wouldn't have believed so either, because when the scientists and the doctors say this is a real disease and it's really killing people, and you can see the results of it, of the people dying in mass numbers, you know, I mean, and I knew there was a lot of elder discrimination in this country. I knew that was true. Okay, people don't want to discuss it, but it is. Go try to get a job if you're elderly. Right? Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of elderly discrimination people don't want to talk about in this country, but it's still there. There's like some other forms of discrimination, but to let people this many people die just because of the elderly don't matter anymore or whatever, we're not gonna admit that this is really going on because the stronger, healthier people still staying alive. So maybe this is just natural selection. Oh well. Well, if natural selection is the way you want the world to go, well, I guess we shouldn't treat anybody for any medical stuff at all. So I guess if your appendix ruptures, we'll just let you die rather than save you. But if you're having a baby and have complications, we'll just let you die and not save you, because after all, you chose to get pregnant. So if you die during pregnancy, oh well. That's kind of the way this thinking is. And it's like we have the ability to do something about it. We should be doing something about it, not just, oh well, letting people die because their lives don't matter. It's like,
well, and just because
lives don't matter then or whatever. Crazy.
Well, and people are confusing anybody who says that natural selection, is a favorable thing, is confusing reality, that natural selection exists with just because it exists, it's a good thing. I mean, yes, yeah. Natural selection absolutely exists, but that doesn't mean anytime somebody breaks a leg, we leave them behind for the bears to eat them,
Exactly.
It's the same thing with coronavirus. Yes, because the fact that the coronavirus exists is a reality. That doesn't mean that I want it to be. It is, so we need to address it.
Yeah.
And there was a point where Trump actually recommended shutting down stuff. I think he just got bored with it. I'm going to play that clip for you right now.
We'd much rather be ahead of the curve than behind it, and that's what we are. Therefore, my administration is recommending that all Americans, including the young and healthy, work to engage in schooling from home when possible, avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts.
That was back in March.
Wow, that was at least more than what would need to be being done.
Yeah.
Yeah. What happened to all of that?
He realized that actually shutting down the country was going to start hurting the economy, and that he'd already said that the coronavirus was fake. So when it got difficult, he decided to go back into denial and deflection mode. That's my personal opinion.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, because it sure changed. I think you're right about the economic part. I think he got terrified because the economy was doing better, and that was making his administration look good and look good for a second term for him. And this has really reversed that. And I think it was going downhill with the economy so fast it probably scared him. And he thought, I'm going to lose the election, over the economic stuff.
Yeah.
But the deal is, if we just shut down, we could shut down for a shorter period of time. If everything would have shut at once, and then it could have got rid of the daggone virus, and then we could open back up, and we actually would have had less time down and people away from their jobs for less time, and the economy would have been better off than it is now, with this thing lagging around forever and ever and ever, us limping along. And they keep trying to go from like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, but every time they start moving toward open up to another phase, we start having more cases again. I think with schools going back in and all of this, we're going to have a lot more of it again. And I think it's really sad, because here comes another round of this stuff. I think I could try not to be wrong, but I think we'll have another round of it.
Oh, we already know we are. There's so the colleges have been open for a little while, and the ones that actually opened are already starting to see a huge bump in cases. I believe it was this morning. I'd have to go look up exactly which one it was, but I want to say it was the University of Michigan has already started recommending that its students start quarantining because they're seeing a huge influx of cases. And I know a couple of weeks ago, the University of Alabama had bumped up like 400 or 500 cases. I mean, it's just anybody who's been college student age knows that college students don't always make the wisest decisions, and college students are going to like to party. So not grouping them all together where they can all get together and, you know, spread the virus among each other, or even heck, sit in the same classroom and spread the virus among each other would seem like a smart decision. You know, one that Trump agreed with back in March, but apparently, can't do that now.
Yeah. And what are we going to do when we have universities and colleges all across this country becoming hotspots? I mean, that can just make it spread like crazy. Plus, you got all these elementary schools and junior highs or middle schools or whatever, and high schools, you know, out there. And I know they're some of them are at half capacity. You know, they're doing half. Like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they'll go, and then Tuesday, Thursday, they'll stay home and use computer classes or whatever, so they don't have as many of them in there. But you can't pack people in a hallway without masks and stuff on, and all of them touching the same stuff, you know, doorknobs and everything else, you know, going in and out of restrooms. You can't put, eating in a cafeteria, you can't put people all together. They got to take off their mask to eat. You can't put people all together like that, even more spaced out, I don't think, in that kind of environment without spreading it. I don't see how you're going to keep it down, and that's been my concern, because I don't see, until we have such a raging case, that we'll never get this stuff under control. I'm afraid nobody's going to do anything with it, and that's one of my big concerns, and one of the reasons, frankly, I'd like to see somebody else in office that would do something about this. It used to be that when people got in office, their whole thing was about, I'm here to serve the people. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be serving the country and serving the people. Now the politicians get in office about serving themselves. It's not about serving the people. And that's my concern, is because the people are dying because nobody's serving the people. They're too worried about getting reelected, to worry about serving the people. That's what they got put up there to do, not to get themselves reelected.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, anybody who thinks, okay, college students, yeah, you might have a chance. Like, you know, as somebody in chat just said, you know, their college is remote, but campus is open. So they're having, you know, a case or so pop up every week. Okay. You know, at least you got some chance because college students can age. But anybody who thinks that elementary students, middle school students aren't going to be spreading this like crazy if they actually go to the same school as each other is just delusional. I mean, even if you send 2 7-year-olds to first grade, second grade together, right? And you try and make them all wear a mask and everything else. I mean, I can almost promise you that one of them's going to come home with go to school with a Spider-Man mask and come home with a Batman mask because he and his friend decided to trade because they liked, you know, the other one more. I mean, they're 7. What do you expect?
Exactly. It's like we as adults have to use more sense in how to help this situation, not leave the decisions up to the 7-year-olds.
I mean, how many adults do you see walking around that can't even wear a mask properly, you know, that have it down here covering their mouth with their nose wide open, or have it down around their neck, and you're expecting the 7-year-olds to do it? Seriously? You're expecting the 7-year-olds to use hand sanitizer every 5 minutes? I mean, we've got an almost 5-year-old here at the house, and he wears his mask when we go out, and he, you know, doesn't touch things, but I'm not going to take him to a playground or a classroom with a group of 30, 40 other kids and expect him to do everything. Heck, you put him on a playground, he listens better than most, but when he's around 40, 50 other kids, he's going to get excited and they're all going to play together. And that's unfortunately what we don't need right now.
Right. Yeah, we don't need it. And we've got them going back, by the way, and doing football and stuff together, too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, contact sports. And, like, that's smart, okay? You know, how are you going to play football with a mask on? Number one, you can't. You're going to be, and you're going to be huffing and puffing and breathing into each other's face when you line up, you know, to scrimmage. So you're breathing all in each other's face, and then you wonder why they start coming down with coronavirus. Well, I mean, golly gee, that isn't too hard to figure out. I mean, they
are reopening. They are reopening the NFL.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the NFL's going on, about to start. I got a notification that kickoff was coming here soon. Okay. So, I mean, while I'm happy on one hand that I can, you know, bet on NFL games in Vegas again, You know?
Yeah.
The new category for the over under of when the season's going to end because of the coronavirus, you know, pandemic, you know, closing the whole season 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, 5 weeks in, because they realize that they can't actually contain this shit. Yeah, that's not a category I'm too excited for right now. I mean, it would seem like putting everybody in a stadium or having high school kids breathing on each other, tackling each other is all the things you don't want right now. You know, all the things we could have right now had we actually taken this seriously back in March when Trump said we should take it seriously. And then he got bored with it and didn't come up with any kind of federal plan to take it seriously. So now here we are.
No, there's been not enough problem solving. There's not enough problem solving. Now, I know they're all working on some vaccines in other countries and in this country. To be fair and honest about that, there are some vaccines being worked on that are in trials. And, you know, if they didn't think it was real, why are they developing vaccines? Okay, obviously they thought it was real. They didn't want to deal with it, but they didn't think it was real enough to be giving money for vaccine development. Okay, so let's just put that out there, too, for people to think about. There are vaccines being developed. Now, when they're going to be safe enough for all of us to take it and everything else, I don't know. The first
2 years.
Testing on with health people. Yeah, 2 years. Well,
average
2 years. So
average vaccine development cycle, the earliest vaccine development cycle I'd seen when I was researching it was 2 years. To get it all the way from
2 years.
At the pace we're going, I mean, we got 190,000 in 6 months. So let's just call it 4 times 200,000. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a scary.
And that's in this country. You know, we're not even talking about the world right now.
I know. And that's just Americans. And we're talking about people overseas, of course, time too. But I mean, we're talking about Americans doing such a bad job of managing this when we should be world leaders in managing this kind of stuff, not the ones who are sitting there in denial and just letting their people die and going, oh, well, other lives don't matter. When it starts killing the rest of us, we'll care, because the young people don't want to wear a mask and they go anywhere because they think, oh, well, we're not going to get it, so we don't care if we give it to somebody else. You know, all these kids that send to school will come home even if they don't get it and die. They're giving it to grandparents and, you know, parents and all these other people that, you know, die of this stuff. And it's like, well, then if enough of these, say, teenagers come home and give it to their parents who can be elderly by then, can be getting in more of the elderly category, now then who's going to finish raising these kids? That's what I want to know. I mean, how far does this thing have to go before people take it serious?
I think the honest answer is it has to affect them personally. Because you see consistently when it hits somebody close to home, all of a sudden their opinion changes. But until then, as long as it's not us, as long as it's not me, my family, you know, my team, and it's the other people that are getting affected by it, the conservative answer is typically, I don't care. It doesn't affect me personally. I don't need to worry about it.
So how narcissistic is that? That's my question.
Oh, I agree entirely.
If you're having a leader at the top show narcissism by, as long as it doesn't affect his campaign, he doesn't care, okay, because it doesn't affect him personally, then they're taking the same attitude. If it doesn't affect me personally, it doesn't matter. Well, that's narcissism to the supreme. I don't care if it's from your top leader or down. It's still narcissistic as it can be. And, you know, you don't not caring about anybody but yourself, you know, and at that stage, I guess we're going to have to wait till all of them get sick enough and die. And they keep talking about herd immunity. Well, we got to have too many people die to get herd immunity. You don't want that many people to have to die to have herd immunity. Ridiculous.
No, especially when, I mean, look at the things we were being asked to do by the CDC. Okay, if somebody, we need to shut down the country and isolate people for a couple, 3 weeks. When we reopen, people need to wear masks and use hand sanitizer. Okay, wash your hands, right? And then the big congregations of people, we need to stop that for a while. Churches, schools, etc. Okay, and once we reopen, you know, once we've got this clamped down enough and then we start reopening, we need to have enough tests at that point so that when we find a guy that's got it or a girl, we can go test that person and we can test everybody they came in contact with so we can get it back isolated and keep it clamped down. Because by the time they were allowed to start addressing it, you know, it was already blown up and everywhere. None of those things are very difficult. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, okay, you know, You stay at home for 2 to 3 weeks. You don't go to church or school for a month or two, and then have tests available and encourage the doctors and the medical staff and educate the population that, hey, if somebody, tests positive for this stuff, you're going to get a notification via text message or whatever saying, hey, you knew Bob Jones, he tested positive for it. You need to go see your doctor and get a test. And the test, and we could have paid for the test and it would have solved it. This is, none of this was difficult. It's not like you're being asked to, chop off your arm or something ridiculous. We could have literally... Go ahead. I'm sorry.
People are being inconvenient. Okay?
Yeah.
And when they're the people in this country are not used to being inconvenienced. In many ways, they're very spoiled. They really are. And there is the issue of giving up their freedom, which, of course, we take our freedom in this country very seriously, and we need to take our freedom very seriously. I have no problem with that whatsoever, because that's part of what we're about over here is the freedom, and we don't want to give up our individual freedom. But we're not asking somebody to give up a huge individual freedom for some long period of time. We're asking them to give up inconveniences, to put up with some inconvenience for a while. That's not the same thing as giving up your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is what you're guaranteed under, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and stuff.
Thomas Jefferson said it best. Your right to swing your fist, you've got that right all day long, but it stops where my nose begins. You don't get to swing your fist to the point where it hits me. And right now, when you could be carrying a virus that might kill me, yeah, your right to that individual freedom to walk around without a mask and breathe on me, because newsflash for all the conservatives who were on my Facebook, the mask protects the other person from you. It's not supposed to protect you from them, since y'all don't seem to understand that. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's not an infringement on your freedom. That's a protection of mine, and vice versa.
Right.
So requiring somebody to wear a mask, when we already require them to wear a seatbelt, and when we require them to wear pants in public, and when we require you to wear a shirt, that's not an infringement on your freedom. It's a small inconvenience to protect somebody else's right to life. You are absolutely on the money with that.
Yeah, well, that's the way I feel about it. It's right to life. Yes, you have a right to liberty, just like you have a right to life, but you have to look at, where your liberty ends, like you said, and somebody else's begins, and trying to be fair as Americans to everybody. We talk about justice and fairness in this country, for justice for all. Well, it's not just for elderly. If you don't wear a mask, you don't give a shit where they die. Where's the justice for these people who have died because people refuse to be inconvenienced to keep people alive?
Yeah,
and that's an issue.
And an even more basic issue is we know it's killing elderly people disproportionately. It's killing a lot more of them than it is, younger people. But that's only talking about the death count. We're not even talking about the people that are going to have lifelong health problems as a result of this, because we know that it affects your respiratory system potentially permanently. We know that it can affect your heart potentially permanently. So it can give you heart damage. It can give you permanent lung damage. We know it does all of these things. So even if you get it and you don't, you survive, congratulations, good job, thank goodness. Okay. We're not going to count you in the numbers, but you might have heart problems for the rest of your life. You might have respiratory problems for the rest of your life. You might catch the seasonal flu 10 years from now, and had you never had the coronavirus and had a healthy lung respiratory system as a result of not having caught the coronavirus, you would have survived that seasonal flu 10 years from now. But now you won't.
Yeah. That's the whole issue. See, and they're thinking, oh, well, we're young, so it doesn't matter. But that doesn't mean that this won't take years off their life down the road. And that's the point that they're not looking at. They're not looking at this from a reality-based thing. They're thinking about what's affecting them right now, and that's it.
Yeah. How many hundreds of thousands of people... Because we've got 200,000 dead almost. How many hundreds of thousands of people do we have out there that have issues that are potentially going to lead to their deaths later on down the road? Situations they would have survived had they not had coronavirus in the first place this go around.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big consideration. When we gripe now about the health bill for this country being too high, it's getting ready to get higher.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not We talk about the obesity in this country is such a problem, and it is, and that's going to create it creates a lot more health issues for people younger. So the younger generations, all are getting diabetes sooner, all these other things that they're getting. Well, diabetes people with coronavirus are dying a lot more disproportionately. We'll wait till these people have got the health issues like diabetes younger, and then they get a complication, and because they had coronavirus, they die. They can't get through it at all. So here we go. So we may, these young people who think it isn't going to affect them, they're just carriers. Oh, well, to give it to somebody else, no big deal. Well, when they start all dying 15 years younger than they should be dying, or whatever, 20 years younger, all of a sudden it may be a big deal. But they're not looking at that now. When they care about it down the road in a few years, they're going to wish they'd listened now. And they're not. And the government isn't making them listen, and not caring who else they infect or who else gets disproportionately affected. And that's why I think that, we need some leadership. The CDC needed to be able to do their job with their hands untied.
Yeah.
They need to be able to say the truth to people. The truth need to get out there, not censored truth, just truth out there. So the medical professionals can do what they need to do, and so the public can be educated, and so people can be encouraged to do what they needed to do for everybody to be safe, and get the politics out of it, and get the narcissism out of it, and get all this other stuff that doesn't matter out of it. And that, yes, you're being inconvenienced. I'm sorry you have to wear a mask. I'm sorry you're being inconvenienced, but choose. You want to be inconvenienced or you want to be dead? Or which you think holds the highest priority? I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about an inconvenience. And I couldn't agree with you more on the CDC thing. I mean, quite literally at every step, they have been blocked as much as they can be blocked. We had a pandemic team over in China, to watch out for stuff like this. That got dismantled by Trump. Okay. And then once it started coming over here and they were telling him it was serious, we went on national television news and said it wasn't serious. Again, Trump, when the CDC said that malaria drug was not a viable treatment for coronavirus, they'd seen no evidence for it, and it didn't seem like it was going to do anything. Again, Trump was promoting it. Okay. I mean, it's just like, get the hell out of the way. You're not a doctor. Put the doctors in place. Exactly. And then follow their recommendations. And if you want to get, and if you want to listen to doctors with competing views, hey, I'm fine with that. Hey, these 99 doctors are all telling me the same thing. Cool. We're going to listen to those 98 and let's go find the 2 whack jobs that are telling me that, it's caused by Satan or whatever. And we'll listen to them and we'll see, who has the best arguments and who has the most evidence and which path we should follow. I'm not saying you only got to listen to one side here, but follow the damn evidence and get out of the way of the side that's trying to follow the evidence, and at least listen to the arguments and the evidence that the side that you don't like is presenting.
Right.
Why are you so fragile that you can't even listen to that side? That's what blows my mind.
Well, there's an old saying around leaders that say if you provide yourself with people around you who are all yes men, will only tell you, what agree with you and say yes, 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 and they never play devil's advocate. They never have anybody come in and say, well, what if we're wrong and it's this way, or what if this, or what if that? And so all you have is yes people. You never get the big picture. You never get all of the truth about anything. And what's happening, I think, a lot is every time somebody disagrees with Trump, he just wants to get rid of him. It's like
he just fires him.
To be surrounded by all yes men. Yeah, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous for the country. If he's doing this in every other area, national security, everything, if he's got this attitude toward everything, that's pretty scary, because how much is being missed at the top right now to make any good decision? You can't make a good decision without enough data. And if all you're getting is data that's, prejudiced toward what you already believe, then you're not getting anything else to round out your views, and you can miss big, huge blind spots all over the place for big decisions that have to do with everything. The economy, the health of the country, world, economic issues. I mean, we're not a member of the WHO anymore and NATO, and we keep pulling out of everything that makes us have more information and shutting ourselves down to less and less and less information. And I think that's dangerous, personally.
That absolutely is.
Thing at all.
It absolutely is. I mean, that buys you knowledge and it buys you influence. I mean, China wanted to keep it quiet this time, right? The reason that it got out was because we gave more money to the WHO than China did, because we have more influence with them. Okay. Now we're going to pull out. So the next time it comes around, we're not even going to know before it hits our shores. I mean, I guess if you're just going to pretend like it's a hoax once it gets here, it doesn't really matter. But for those of us who would like to know so we could get ahead of the curve, pulling out of these things is a bad idea. If we want to pull out of NATO, somebody else is going to step into those shoes. I mean, you can't be a world leader if you're not even going to play on the world stage. I can't be a star NFL quarterback if I'm not even going to show up for the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the point we're at right now.
Yeah. And we're getting less and less respect, from the world, and more, disrespect, like other countries don't want us coming to their country because we're all out there bringing the coronavirus to anybody else just about, so they don't want us coming over because we've handled it so poorly. I can't say it's a blame. If I was in their country, I wouldn't want us over there either.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
They just want to be smart and protect their own country. I mean, but I mean, people are getting less and less respect for the United States all the time, instead of us being the winners who are coming in and proving that we can handle this, and the first one to come up with a vaccine, and the first one to go out helping other countries even vaccinate their people. We used to be the ones doing all that kind of stuff. What happened to America? And Trump ran on, let's make America great again. I don't see America getting greater since he's been in there. I think it's getting worse. So what happened to make America great again? A lot of us voted for him because we wanted that. We wanted that American strength again. We're not strong. We're weaker than ever.
Well, I mean, we're number one.
We're weak at home. We're weak overseas. It looks bad to me, and I was a Trump, voter, so I've changed my whole tune on this.
Well, I mean, he did get us to number one. Granted, it's in coronavirus cases and deaths, but we're number one. So, I mean, I guess that's something.
We're number one. Well, it's really sad. I mean, it's really sad. We used to be one in economics. We used to be one in healthcare. We used to be one in, manufacturing. We used to be one in so many things years ago. And a lot of us wanted us to see all that come back again. When I was growing up, America was number one in everything. And now it's like it's number one in very little, like to me anymore. And it just keeps sliding further and further back. But if we're not problem solving, if we're just sticking our head in the sand with everything, well, you're never going to get ahead in anything. Because if you don't look at a problem and say, yeah, that actually is a problem, we need to problem solve. You can't problem solve something you don't admit exists. So how are you? And the people who come to you and say, "Well, we have a solution to this," but you say, "Oh, well, I don't want to listen to that because I don't even think it exists." But how do you get to any solutions if your people at the top won't look at it? I mean, I don't know how these people at the CDC have been able to stand working their jobs. I feel for them. I mean, I really do feel for them. I mean, these people are probably out pulling their hair out trying to figure out how to help us and not being allowed to.
Well, and I'm gonna ask you one more question before I let you go and open up the lines to somebody else. I agree with you that you can't find the answers if the people at the top won't look at the problems. My question is, how do you get the people at the top to look at the problems if the voters won't hold them accountable when they don't?
Oh, that is a good question. Well, you talk about voter rights and responsibilities, and I think we all have a right to go out there and start voting out people who won't look at the problems and problem solve them, and that sends a really strong message to the rest of the people who are running for office. You better look at this stuff, or you're not going to get a second term. And
that's what it's going to take.
And then maybe, yeah, it is. All the rest of us just get to die, and they get to sit up there on the top by their little cells as an island because everybody else around is going to be dead. I mean, that's what you're looking at.
Well, that, in my opinion, is what made this country great and what can make us great again, is if we start holding our leaders accountable. When we started, when this country was founded, there was no way to hold King George accountable for anything he did. We have that ability now. We fought an entire war to establish that right and that ability. The ability to hold leaders who aren't looking at real world problems, real problems in our country that are affecting our people that are living here. We fought an entire war against the greatest empire that the world had seen at that point to establish that right. And people need to exercise it. I thank you for your call, Marilyn. I greatly appreciate it. We're going to take a brief break, and then we will be back after that.
Thank you so much for your time and for this opportunity to get to speak my mind. I really appreciate it. Good luck to you.
Same to you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Looks like we're going to be bringing in Jeffrey Mitchell from Eugene, Oregon. Jeff, you are live on the air. How are you doing?
I'm good, Chris.
Pleasure to talk to you. What do you have to say, sir?
Well, you know, we keep hearing about Trump's narcissism and, you know, all of the things he does. He doesn't listen. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. And I mean, in fairness, anybody that's going to run for that office has to have a level of hubris, and there's got to be some narcissism in there somewhere. You just can't occupy that office without it, I don't think.
In today's America, I can see the argument for it. I agree to a certain extent. I mean, you do have to think that you're capable of the job, and it's a big job.
I mean, well, let's face this fact. Anybody that's going to go after the job is going to have a level of self-belief that for the average person is going to come across as being narcissistic. But even more to the point, the only way you get somebody that's truly humble in that job is somebody that gets selected on the ticket that's in the downline for the succession to the office, and then we lose the president for some reason. And I would point to Harry S. Truman as a perfect example of that. The man never wanted the job.
Yeah, I can see that. But I don't think that having a strong self-belief in yourself precludes actually giving a damn about other American citizens. And I can point to Abraham Lincoln. I can point to George Washington. I can point to Theodore Roosevelt if you want to go to somebody in the downline who was, you know, put to the side, because remember, he was never actually supposed to be president in the first place. So there's a difference between a strong self-belief in the sense of, you know, hey, I think I would be the best person to run this country. And I agree that can come across as narcissistic, and a, hey, this doesn't exist because it's inconvenient for me.
So the reason I called really wasn't about Trump's narcissism, but his narcissism brings to light. And I should say, I'm a conservative coming into this.
Okay.
And have been all of my life. And so I am absolutely positive there are a number of things that we are going to disagree, sometimes vehemently on.
Absolutely. However, but I welcome your call.
That having been said, I try to use critical thinking, like you've been talking about, when approached with a problem. So which solution truly works? And the basis of my call, as I put through to the producer through the recording, was that really what I'm here to talk about is, you know, this nice lady before me brought up the fact that, you know, people have the right to vote, and you brought up the responsibility aspect of it, and that's what I'd like to speak to. As American citizens who have the right to vote, in other words, non-convicted felons, I'm not for giving convicted felons the right to vote again. They've pretty much shown that they have total disregard for the law if they've been convicted of a felony at some point.
And we found the first area we disagree in, but please continue.
But at least there was a disregard for the law at some point in their past, hence their conviction of a felony. But what most of us, I think, forget is that not only is it a right to vote, it's a responsibility to vote. And voting doesn't just necessarily take place at the polling booth. We also get to vote every single day with our pocketbooks. And they're two disparate subjects, but nonetheless, we get to vote every single day of our lives. However, the votes that matter as far as how our country is run are for our elected representation in the House of Representatives and the two senators that are elected from each state. Well, the representatives only serve 2 years in Congress. So you would think that there would be a propensity for those people to turn over more than the senators do. And when you look at the historical data on it, I'm sure that you'll find that the senators do change less just by virtue of the fact that they serve 6 versus 2 years.
Yes.
My point is, when you have a Speaker of the House who can't put together 2 cogent sentences in a row, what does it say about the constituency of the district that put her into place? It just begs the question, what are these people thinking? Or are they? Or are the people of the district really getting out the vote? Because she's been there now long enough that she has the seniority to be the Speaker of the House. And the same can be said for any district where the representative forgets their job is to represent their constituency. And the 535 members of Congress are the ones tasked with actually running the country. The president's job isn't to run the country. The president's job is to determine the direction that he believes the country should move in, and then to get the 535 members on the Hill to actually go there. But the real people who run this country are the 535 members of Congress, 435 of them in the House of Representatives, and 100 of them in the Senate. So I would say, stop talking about the right that people have to vote. Let's talk about the responsibility people have to ensure that whatever their belief structure is, that they vote their conscience and ensure that they put the right person in place to facilitate their beliefs continuing to move forward at a national level.
So how would you feel about some kind of mandatory voting law? There are several other democracies worldwide that require it. Yeah, if you're of age to vote, you are required to vote, and if you don't, you get a fine.
Well, we watched a democratically led Congress fine us for not signing up to be part of the health care program, which I thought was rather wrong.
A national health care program would certainly help right now with the 200,000 dead we've got, don't you think?
I don't know that it would have kept those 200,000 from dying.
Other developed countries that have a national health care system have a whole lot lower percentage of dead people.
I think that in a nationalized healthcare system, there are probably higher requirements for minimum medical equipment than what we have in our system presently.
Higher requirements for minimum. So you're saying that under a national healthcare system, we would have better equipment?
Not necessarily better, but certainly
the minimum standard would be better.
Right.
Okay. Because like I said, when I look at the countries that have...
there are pros and cons for... Go ahead.
I said, when I look at countries that have national healthcare systems, they're handling this a hell of a lot better than we are.
I haven't done anything on that, so I'll have to take your word for that one.
No, that's fair enough.
With one caveat that I'd take a look at it later.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome to call in next week regarding that. To go to your original issue, however, I do agree not enough people are taking their responsibility to vote seriously. But if we're going to call it a responsibility, then it needs to be a responsibility. I personally wouldn't have a problem with some kind of mandatory voting law. Not like jail time if you don't vote, but a small fine. I think it's New Zealand that does it that way. And they make it exceptionally easy to vote. And I don't see why it shouldn't be. As far as your previous point about felons not voting, I think that's where the slippery slope comes in, because laws aren't necessarily moral. You can do something illegal and have it be the moral thing to do. If I smuggled slaves out of the South prior to the Civil War, I was a criminal, both federally and at the state level. That doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to vote. Considering you're talking about, less than 1% of, people being convicted of serious crimes in this country, I don't think less than 1% of voting is going to swing a major election. And if it does, and I would rather have more voters, not less.
Interesting point of view. Don't know how I feel about that. I believe that someone who has done their time and has, we call them penitentiaries in the past for a reason, not prisons. And that was so that people would become closer to God. So it was more of a moral issue. And that's what our laws were based on, were the morals of a Judeo-Christian society. I think we've gotten away from that as we've become less religious, I guess, would be a way of putting it. I don't know exactly how I would phrase that at this point. But it appears that there's at least one generation that doesn't necessarily believe that there is a higher power, if you will. Not necessarily believing in God, but just a higher power on the whole. And so from whence do we take our moral compass? What do we use as the compass to decide what is right, what is wrong? And how do we mete out justice if we can't determine what is morally right and what is morally corrupt?
Well, I think you can determine what is morally right and morally correct without appealing to a God. But
where do you get the morals from them?
From the well-being of thinking creatures. I mean, you can look at just a baseline well-being of an individual and well-being of society and go from there.
But for those that have never been taught that, they have no basis for these things.
Well, you could make the same argument about religion. If you were never, if you think that all morals come from, religious education or religious belief that used to happen, or that used to be the majority in this country. I believe it actually still is the majority, but if you believe that that's declining, the same argument applies. If there's no religious education, then it doesn't, where did they get the education? I think most people know this at a baseline level, though. I mean, if most people didn't know it at the baseline level, all you would see is people out murdering and stealing from each other, and that's not what we see in a majority. But to go back to your original issue...
Living in the Pacific Northwest, I have to tell you that in Portland for the last 104 days, that has been the truth.
Portland is still there, and the last time I looked at a map of the protest, it was 2 city blocks. I mean, are you going to tell me that the whole city's burned down and everybody's killing and murdering each other? Seriously?
But just like this virus that's taken over and becoming a pandemic, it all starts someplace.
Well, I agree, but you're talking about something that might happen that hasn't happened yet. And that's not what we're seeing.
We're seeing the beginnings, aren't we not?
Well, I would argue that no, we're not. I mean, if you look at the overall protest from Black Lives Matter, I mean, it's not like you're seeing tons and tons of violent protests.
I don't know that we need to see tons and tons for it to be a major problem.
Well, I mean, I've got up on the screen right now, which I know you can't see because you're on the screen or you're on the phone. But I mean, Black Lives Matter protests, you've had 26 million Americans at demonstrations, 4,700 demonstrations around the country. Okay. And it's talking about all over the country, 1,360 counties in the United States, roughly 40% have had some manner of protest. If this was going to be a major issue, I think we would have seen it by now. There's not 40% of the country that's on fire and burning down, unless you're looking in different places than I am.
Well, it's a valid point. I'll concede that. I'm just saying, at what point do we draw the line? Where do we say, and even more importantly, those who are breaking the law, why are we not seeing more of them being prosecuted? Why are we not seeing all of this?
Which laws specifically?
Protests. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in law enforcement. I couldn't tell you the specific laws. All I can tell you is that as somebody who believes in doing the right thing for the right reasons at the right time and having a very solid belief in the entire Constitution, because I, like you, swore to uphold, protect, and defend from all, both domestic and foreign, I'm not pleased with the fact that these violent protesters seemingly continue to go and go and go and go and go, and there is no resolution to the violence because they haven't been locked up. They haven't been taken out of the situation. At what point do we say we've had enough?
Well, I disagree with your basic premise that the protests are violent. Are there some protesters that are violent? Absolutely. But as I just pointed out, you've had 26 million Americans attend these protests, and the number continues to go up. You've had 4,700 of them around the country, 4,700 separate demonstrations, and it's taken place in at least 40% of the counties in this country. If these protests were violent to the extent that you're seeming to say that they are or imply that they are, I should be looking out of windows and, every city I land in, seeing 40% of the state on fire. And that's not what I'm seeing. Now, if you want to talk about criminals that aren't being addressed, that's the reason for these protests. I'm not saying all cops are bad, but the ones that are breaking the law need to be held accountable.
So here's the other thing, and this is really the crux of the matter, and I think it's the thing that has been forgotten the most. And you brought it up very early in the show, that our founding fathers did not necessarily agree with each other. And those who were considered liberals at the time might be considered conservative now. However, through all of this, through the entire history of our country, right, wrong, left, right, doesn't really matter. The reason that this country works is because those with differing opinions were willing to listen to those with differing opinions as well, and to hear them out, to listen to the ideas, whether they agreed with them or not. Because a lot of times, and you can point to Reagan and O'Neill, Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House during the Reagan administration, those two fought like cats and dogs in the political arena. Yet they were great friends. They had great respect for each other. Neither called each other names. I don't recall ever hearing either one of them actually throwing an epithet at the other that was intended to strike at their personal worth. And yet, that's what we see today, is people not having that debate. And that's really what we need to get back to. We need to get back to the fact that we can have differing opinions. And just because we have differing opinions doesn't mean that one of us is worse than the other or one of us is better than the other. We just need to get back to the fact that somewhere in the middle is a compromise that will work for the greatest majority of the good. And let's get there. Would you agree with that?
I agree with the vast majority of it. I don't necessarily believe that the compromise is always going to be in the middle. For most things, I would agree with you, but to make the illustration absurd, I don't want to free half the slaves. I want all of them free. So on some things, I would disagree with that statement. But at the more basic level, I completely agree with you. Average Americans need to be talking to each other again. Whether they agree or disagree, they need to at least be willing and able to have the conversation. I have no media training. I'm not a professional camera guy. I'm not a professional host or anything else. I'm just another average American who served this country just like you did, and the discussion needs to be had. Anybody is welcome to call in and have this conversation with me, and I prefer and give priority to the people who say that they disagree with me. And they are always welcome to call in, and their side will be heard. On that note, Jeff, we are wrapping up. I hope that you appreciated my opinion, and I hope that you feel like you had a chance to voice yours. I greatly appreciate your call, and I thank you for calling in. Any final words before we wrap up?
no, God bless America, and God bless the rest of the human race.
I agree entirely. I look forward to speaking with you again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Chris.
And folks, that's going to do it for us today. I thank everybody who tuned in. I thank especially the callers for calling in. And if you're watching this later and you disagree with something, feel free to call in and bring it up with me directly. The lines are always open every Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time, 855-915-5338, 815-955-LEFT. Your call will be live, it will be on the air, it will be unedited, and you will get to say what you have to say. I hope I showed that here today, and I welcome again anybody to call in and speak directly with me. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon. That'll be it from me today, and I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place.